Good evening. Um, I have a little bit of time, so I wanted to just share another document. This is the content of the follow-up Facebook post for Esther Liaw's open letter, and I'll be sharing the link for this, or a link for it. Esther gave a tiny URL link, but somebody made it just a little bit larger font, a little bit easier to read. So this is dated January 9th, 2023. Facebook post on Christian cult awareness, the local church, also referred to here as LC. There's another link here on the website Cult Education Institute about the local church. She gives the written form of various acronyms, like the full-time training in Anaheim is FTTA, Living Stream Bible Truth and Church Service Training, which is also FTTA. The Living Stream Ministry, LSM, the Lord's Recovery, TLR or LR, Witness Lee can be referred to in this document as WL, and Watchman E, WN. Okay. Update. It's been 9 months since I left the Lord's Recovery, the local church, the church in, and then put in the city name, and I stand by my decision benevolently. What I will disclose can be controversial to some, but now as an observant former member, I will share some take-home points. 1. The Lord's Recovery is a modern Christian cult and are extreme fundamentalists. As I recognize the symptoms and repercussions of leaving this church community, I am a cult victim. I have confirmed this sensation with others. 2. Shepherding in most cases is love bombing. 3. A lot of fellowship are coercive persuasions. The feeling in the body is the feeling of someone or a group's opinion who has more power and more say in the church. So true, sister. I remember hearing that a brother said he did not agree with how Steve Isett was being treated, but then he said, but I just feel to go along with the feeling in the body, as if his own personal conviction was discounted as not being the feeling of the body. And again, the body in that scenario is a very, very small group. Not all of the believers in Christ throughout the world. I know they would not have treated Steve Isett the way he was treated by, quote, the Blended Brothers and certain ones with more power in the Lord's Recovery. So excellent point. A lot of fellowship are coercive persuasions. The feeling in the body is the feeling of someone or a group's opinion who has more power and more say in the church. Number 4, this church uplifts narcissism and protects narcissistic leadership. Absolutely. Number 5, female members are and will always be oppressed. This is a warning. You won't be leprous or disobedient if you leave this church. Don't waste your time to please people or men. Yes, and this is helpful, just to insert a little bit here with some of these points. Right now I'm in interaction related to the last video I posted about silencing sisters. And someone said, I think you're just telling one side of the story. You were able to speak. You were even able to write songs and share them. And I bet you spoke to young people and to children. Absolutely. It's a matter of you will be shamed, whoever you are, if you cross a line and say anything that is very honest yet critical. And sisters especially will be oppressed more than the brothers, but then the brothers will also be ostracized and labeled if they step out of line. Okay, Number 6, Witness Lee's words are recorded and replayed and used for profit. Absolutely. As a former FTTA trainee, the ministry books were charged half price. Why aren't these books charged at this price for everyone? How much does it cost to maintain Grace Terrace, located at Rose Hills Memorial Park, the largest cemetery in North America? It's impressive for a not-for-profit church to afford a sizable burial lot in a multi-million-dollar cemetery. Donations aside, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And I don't know the facts about Grace Terrace. I do know that that section is owned by brothers, but I don't know if it's related to the Living Stream specifically or a particular local church or what. Number 7, the repetition and wanting to be Witness Lee's tape recorder is a sign of becoming brainwashed of your own identity. God does not want unity in the form of conformity, not conformity to anyone but Christ himself. I would say that. Does God expect the whole world to adhere to a Chinese-dominated church culture and philosophy? As the world is progressing to be culturally educated and diverse, followers of Witness Lee are at a great disadvantage socially, emotionally, and spiritually. Number 8, the full-time training schools profit a lot of money with the help of labor of the trainees doing service as a form of character discipline. The school is paid for, and students clean the facility under a strict regimented schedule with not enough rest. This promotes workaholism mentality. Hire more janitors and cooks so students can enjoy the training more without immense fatigue. Stop exploiting students. You do have a good point there. Sister Esther, I was also in the FTTA, and I would get migraines by every single Sunday morning, almost, because of exhaustion. And I just told Dave Higgins at that time, who was the manager of the full-time training, I just told him, I meet in Anaheim, so on Sunday mornings, I'm just not going to show up to the 7 a.m. breakfast. The meeting isn't until 10 a.m., and I'm so exhausted that I fight a migraine every Sunday pretty much. Definitely, I've heard of a lot of people who are extra fatigued, and I don't think 7.5 hours of sleep, and that is if you fall asleep right when your head hits the pillow. I don't think 7.5 hours of sleep is enough for everybody, but it is what is scheduled. And those who need exceptions to that schedule, they will get it if they have a particular lineage. If they are related to someone who is held up on a pedestal, they will probably get more favor than someone who is not. Pedigree, that's the word that I was trying to find. Someone with the right pedigree may be given more allowances in the full-time training. Number 9, victim mentality is rampant in the leaders and church members. Did Paul ever call his opposers satanic? Take responsibility for your behaviors or rise to the challenge to improve your community. God did not give us a spirit of cowardice. I'd like to say something about number 9. I did post a video recently where it gives the transcript of Ron Kangas talking about how he was reviled but didn't revile in return. And this is in the context of Steve Isett, who spoke out about lies being published about John Ingalls and others. Steve Isett was not reviling anyone. He was calling out the reviling of others. And yet it was all turned around to be as if he's a reviler and these blended brothers are the victims of reviling. No, John Ingalls was the victim of your reviling. Bill Mallon, John So, Joseph Fung, Steve Isett, Joe Castile, and others. They have been reviled. Number 10, the one church in one city is not exclusive to the Lord's recovery. Other Christian cults follow this teaching. They also ascribe to Christian elitism. Number 11, many teachings in the recovery form an exaggerated sense of self-worth, a superiority complex, or an overstated sense of unworthiness, an inferiority complex. You nailed it, sister. Yes. Both are unhealthy and trap your mind in survivor mode. You're either superior to other Christians, or you have this overstated unworthiness of being, you're absolutely nothing. I heard Ron Kingus recently talk about his wife is nothing, he said. Okay, she's a sister, so she's nothing. I don't believe your sister, your wife, any of you brothers, I don't believe your wife is nothing. And then brothers are also treated as nothing or told to be nothing. And I understand there is some scriptural basis to he must increase and I must decrease. And I'm crucified with Christ. But it is definitely either you are inflated in your ego and your elitism and your exclusivity and superiority, or you are deflated to being absolutely nothing, good only for death and burial. Okay, both are unhealthy. Number 12, many church members are really tied to this community for financial, familial, or marital reasons. This is not a good representation of the kingdom of God. Nonetheless, it is an important reason why people stay in spite of the high demand and mental exertion. Or I would also add to that, people may not stay, but they may feel unable to speak out. I have had quite a few tell me that they have to remain anonymous because of their family relationships, or even with one person, there's a lot of financial help from someone who is in the church, and so they can't speak freely and honestly. Number 13, church members are conditioned to think, be, act a certain way that is approvable by the church community. Most people behave unconsciously and at times are emotionally reactive, sometimes aggressive. Genuine self-expression is stifled and there is a loss of self-awareness. I'm now reviewing what I recorded earlier today and one I just put in here. Sister Esther, I think you probably have a background just from your open letter saying that you wanted to have a blog that provides mental health resources to young people and those struggling in the Lord's recovery. And what you describe in this point, I believe, is very insightful. And I think a lot of these type of things that you're addressing, I haven't fully worked through myself. So I really appreciate your words. Number 14, the nature of this cult preys on the financially illiterate. All your hard-earned money is spent on donation fees. I would say in this group, the rich typically get richer and the poor get poorer. And that is not scriptural. There are a lot of very dire financial needs in this group, or because some have stood up to the bullying of this group. While there are leaders in this group that are very, very, very wealthy. That's not scriptural. There should not be these lacks in the body. Number 15, Witness Lee was deeply involved in money laundering. Ask his relatives. Number 16, and this sister, by the way, wrote this before I stated anything public about these matters. So, number 16, this group preys on well-meaning people who have been through complex trauma. Transference and trauma bonding occurs. Whether members know it or not, they cannot live without the cult because of spiritual codependency. Was Jesus attached to a church organization? Number 17, sex addiction and pornography addiction are marked in members in this group. No one is exempted from poor education and understanding of sexual health. Sisters will be taken advantage of by brothers. Younger members will be taken advantage of by elders or older members or leaders or serving ones. Be careful. Their status or reputation in church means nothing regarding their dignity or their integrity. The ministry won't protect you, the victims, from sexual predators. Protect yourself. And I agree with that. The ministry, those in leadership in the Living Stream ministry and in the churches, have not yet apologized to me for being sexually assaulted by Philip Lee. And now I have learned that that happened to me when I was isolated in the spring of 1987 when I was 16 years old. But that summer, a friend of mine said, "Oh, Ruth, I was completely measured." I've already shared this in a video, so sorry I'm repeating it, but in case you don't watch all the videos, she said, "I was measured by Philip Lee," and I thought, why is a brother doing this? And yes, I was measured on my breasts, my waist, and my hips. And she said, and there was a whole line of hundreds of us sisters. And I said, were any brothers around? And she can't remember any brothers being around. And I said, would your dad have done that? She goes, oh, no, definitely not. Of course not. He was modest. I said, would any brother that you can think of touched you where Philip Lee touched you? She goes, no. So, hello. He was a predator that got to touch the breasts of probably hundreds of sisters, young teenage sisters in Taipei, in that young people's training in Taipei. He might have practiced on me. Sickening. Number 18. No support for marriage, couples, or divorces. If you want a healthy, non-judgmental, transparent community, search elsewhere. This group is not equipped with counseling, and your relationship with your significant other will be riddled with deviant philosophy of marriage isn't to build you up, it's to tear you down. Wow, sister. You got it. This common ministry phrase justifies and enables domestic abuse and unresolved conflict among couples. And I know of so many examples of leaders with extremely unhealthy marriages. Number 19, bearing the cross is equated to asceticism. Members' sense of worth will be crushed in order to endure more abuse, harsh realities, and disrespect. Yes. Number 20, companionships are fake, inorganic, and forced. Companions cross boundaries. Members are conditioned to make toxic and incompatible friendships because of the pressure from leaders to need companions. The world is your oyster. You can make friends who share the same values and interests. You don't need to make friends with people in this group, and you shouldn't be shamed for having, quote, worldly friends. So friendship is very much discouraged in the ministry that this group follows. And people would also talk about how Witness Lee never, or Watchman Nee, or both, never chose his coworkers and never fired his coworkers. He just took everything as God's sovereignty. Well, I don't know how actually coordinated either of those men were with their coworkers, but I would say that it kind of sets a precedence to, even if something is toxic, you just stay with it. But I have learned, that the boundaries need to be intact and that friends are really important. Okay, so 21, and then there's 21.1, 0.2, 0.3, etc. 21.1, dating advice is outdated and inexperienced of what really goes on in the lives of young adults and singles today. Sex health is not encouraged, nor is it a safe place for maturing individuals to open up. Do not consult church members for advice. It's old news and unlearned. Find other reliable resources. 21.2, you will be pressured to date and marry within this cult. You will be shamed and fearful to marry someone outside this cult, even if they are Christian. This is how members stay in this group. 21.3, marrying someone who is unattractive and undesirable is common premise at most wedding testimonies. Ooh. You should marry someone you find attractive and someone you like wholeheartedly with reciprocity. 21.4, members are pressured to marry someone when they have zero dating or relationship experience. It's a recipe for disaster and toxic relationships and trauma bonding. 21.5, in order to properly date someone, you need to fellowship with an older one or elder. Some older members will try to matchmake you incessantly. I've heard of many, many cases where someone is told not to marry the person that eventually is their spouse, or to marry someone who is not their spouse today and they escaped that. And this is by older ones, by coworkers. And I also know of quite a few couples that were the result of listening to this matchmaking and not with healthy results. Okay, so some older members will try to matchmake you incessantly. Either way, this creates false sense of security in finding a true partner. Just because this person is a brother or sister in the church, has the elder's stamp of approval, or is recommended by a church member, does not mean this person is automatically a match made in heaven. Address behavioral issues and don't cover up the red flags. Like the teaching might be interpreted, forgive their sins. Address the issues. 22. This cult will form a wedge with you and your family and relatives. You will be so invested in this cult group that you will have no time or energy to build upon your relationship with the people who financially support, feed, and really care for you. The cult's interest is to exploit your time and money. Reassess your time with this group. Don't compromise your family relationships. And I would say a lot of people don't really know about this if they have their family is a very much a church family. So this perspective does require that you have family members that aren't active church members, and by church members I mean in this group. Okay, number 23, females are the weaker vessel and males are stronger vessels. Terminology like this separates genders and creates power imbalance among couples and families. This group is extremely complementarian and has no leeway or egalitarianism. Also, men and women sit separately in church meetings, including spouses and siblings, with males sitting in the front row. This is the cult's message. Now, this isn't always the case. And yes, as to weaker vessels is in, I believe, 1 Peter, otherwise it's 2 Peter, that husbands are to honor their wives and care for them as a weaker vessel. But there is definitely, as mentioned before, the oppression of sisters that I wasn't able to really detect until outside of this group long enough. Okay, number 24, pervading utopian philosophy with this happy place, New Jerusalem, new creation, one new man, loaded language. It's all made up. Well, I would say, my dear, that, a lot of these phrases are in the Bible, but the way that they're applied is escaping everyday reality. We live in this world, though we're not of it. Jesus faced head on all the societal issues of this world, personal and universal, and I would say that this group does not address societal issues around us. It's just bring the Lord back and he'll take care of it all. But Jesus' message was very much to care for the oppressed in the community, and this group does not. Okay, number 25, leaders and elders advocate authoritarianism and take the role of God's deputy authority, but no one, no council or organization body is watching over these men from stepping out of line. The framework is corrupted. Number 26, to be God-men is to enable an elitist mindset, becoming higher than a mere human. Number 27, divorce rates are going up in this cult group. Ask the leaders. The issue is not with the members. It is the toxic cult culture. I won't be replying or reading direct messages. If you should unfriend, I take no offense. This platform is where I share my opinion and experiences freely. Thanks for reading. And she hashtags certain ones, which I will also hashtag, and I will include this with both links. Thank you, Sister Esther. So then she wrote some other points here. Number 1, why would I place myself in a vulnerable spotlight and lose the community I invested in and served for almost 20 years? Because the most horrible feeling is being in a cult and not knowing I was in a cult. Will a cult admit they are a cult? Never. As a young person, I heard the same old story. It's poison. Stay away from it. These are lies from the enemy. I don't know if Witness Lee intended to raise a cult, but as you go up the ladder, the real problems with church members in the community, including aggressive treatment, severe mental health issues, sexual misconduct, and domestic violence, will be downplayed. Based on actions, not words, what matters is church growth and church prophet. Yeah, they don't say this, but you see it in the actions that what matters is the growth in numbers and in money. The Lord's recovery is not the only group of, quote, overcomers to be the bride of Christ. This is one cult of many. Check my conversation with a cult survivor from the Branhamites. And then she has, need I say, Lehites? So absolutely, people followed Branham, similarly as following Witness Lee. Okay, so here a Branhamite wrote, mine was called The Message of the Hour. And I subscribe to the channel. I think it's The Message. And it's a descendant of William Branham who's speaking out. I believe it's his grandson. Very helpful podcast. Okay, so this person who escaped that cult said, mine was called The Message of the Hour and sometimes Branhamites by outsiders. It was a Bible-based end times cult founded on the teachings of a man, William Branham, who died in the 1960s. We called him the prophet. He was supposed to be the voice of God. It's not as big as, for example, the Mormons, but there are still millions of people around the world following it. In my city of about 1 million people, there were 5 churches, plus some people who would just stay home and listen to the prophet's taped sermons. Do you feel open to sharing a bit more about yours? I just read your post about the leader with the rumored crystal coffin. When our prophet died, his body was frozen for 4 months because they believed he would resurrect on Easter morning. He died in December. I almost laughed out loud a few times while reading your messages. There are some fierce similarities. We called our prophet and each other brother and sister as well. We were overcomers, and we were the special elite bride of Christ. My blank has read Watchman Nee, and I've heard him quoted from our pulpit too. I just read an article about his sexual affairs plus shady business practices, and am in shock. Our prophet was the prophet of the age. It was as if salvation wasn't enough, like other Christians. You had to believe the message of the prophet, or you wouldn't be raptured or be the bride. You'd be a servant in the kingdom of heaven, not allowed to go into the city. All of this is what the Branham escapee shared. So they called theirs the prophet, and each other brother and sister. So Watchman Nee was quoted from their pulpit as well. Okay, so this was all a Branhamite sharing, an ex-Branhamite. So now back to Esther. Number 2, I stayed in this group because the Recovery Version Bible, footnotes, and ministry books had, quote, all the answers. These errors formed the foundation for a Christian cult called the Assembly to develop into a cult. The Lord's Recovery is sharing the same errors and characteristics. The Bible was used to intimidate and condemn people and induce fear. People were taught to constantly look inward with self-criticism and to perceive God as a harsh judge. Christians who are not overcomers would not be part of the bride of Christ, would be hurt of the second death and cast into outer darkness. Leaving the assembly was synonymous with leaving Christ. Authority was vested in leaders who were not accountable to the church, but to one man who was completely unaccountable to anyone. Leaders were taught to view themselves as superior and to view the members as ignorant, immature children. The members were made dependent on the leaders for major and minor life decisions. Leaders exercised a high degree of authoritarian control over many aspects of people's private lives. Legalistic rules covered everything from dating to earrings to which car to buy. The pyramid structure required the sheep to be subject to those above them, to imitate them and serve them as service offered to the Lord. Intimidation and coercion ensured compliance, consequences, loss of privileges, labeling, public character assassination, shunning, threat of eternal loss. As noted, a totalistic lifestyle consumed members' entire lives. An elitist and suspicious stance toward other Christians except those long dead, resulting in isolation from the wider body of Christ, isolation from relatives and friends who are not in the group and from society, isolation from outside ideas and information, television, unapproved books and websites, contact with former members. So there are some websites. They also had special language, nothing to do with Witness Lee learning English, Cults are known to have loaded language. Screenshots are from this link. Loaded language in the assemblies. The heavenly vision was one of them. Overcomer. I'll just show this. The loaded language in the assemblies. I guess the assemblies is those that follow the message of the hour. So loaded language, demand for purity, and sacred science of the assemblies. Suicide among members, ex-members from the Lord's Recovery. Is it just a coincidence another non-denominational church leader with a low-profile following also had the same heavenly vision as Witness Lee, not to mention how Witness Lee was obsessed in analyzing how cult groups grew in number and implemented door knocking? This is enough evidence for me. I knew I was partially being brainwashed with the incessant repetition, but I protected my right to think critically. I was passive and I didn't have the confidence to take responsibility for my life. I gave permission for someone else to take control over my life, to think for me, to tell me what to do, to give my attention to pour all my time and energy to. The Lord's Recovery was my home until I saw how much the headquarters in Anaheim doesn't really care for the condition and state of the church members. The cult system isn't designed that way. It's designed for one's time and money to go to them until one cannot live without them. If you have to listen, read, or watch their material, even if you obtain them free or illegally, in order to feel better, you're a victim. You're already a victim. What matters is this organization's growth and profit, its survival of the fittest. If you don't have a support system in the church, you will struggle. Don't get me started with all the paranoia, depression, and anxiety disorders people have developed in this group. Even suicide is not enough to wake church members to the depravity of the situation. Ex-members have spoken up. Don't be ignorant of the truth. Please do your research. It's your life or theirs. Thank you, my dear. Okay, so this is a quote from Psychology Today. Threats of shunning or excommunication are powerful tools of control. Mental health issues inside an authoritarian cult. Destructive cults promote the idea that their leader, doctrine, and policies are perfect. Although policies and leadership may change over time, their authority is the one and only, is pervasive and consistently used to maintain power over people. Therefore, mental health issues among their adherents cannot be attributed to the cult, as that would call this institution into question. Therefore, any mental health problems must be the individual's fault rather than involvement in the cult. If someone dares to exit the cult and criticize, the tactical response is typically an ad hominem attack. The critic or former member's character is attacked rather than addressing the factual issue itself. Whatever attitudes a particular cult may have toward mental health per se, the culture of the authoritarian cults itself contributes to severe mental distress. Members of cults are commonly required to work long hours, and schedules are always packed. Recruiting, fundraising, doing political demonstrations, frequent and lengthy study sessions. Leaving any authoritarian organization that uses undue influence to maintain its power is a healthy act of self-preservation. And by the way, in the Lord's Recovery, that would be a huge bad word, self-preservation. And so it basically, you aren't allowed to preserve yourself. That would be like, you're supposed to take the cross, lose yourself and deny yourself. So what are you talking about? Self-preservation. But there's a different, anyway. Willingness to speak openly and publicly of one's experience to help others struggling with similar issues should be supported and applauded. Thank you to those who have supported my speaking out. And Esther, I'm supporting you. Okay, let's get back to the topic of the recovery developing into a cult. This group doesn't hit any of these points. The Bible was used to intimidate and condemn people and induce fear. People were taught to constantly look inward with self-criticism and to perceive God as a harsh judge. Christians who are not overcomers would not be part of the bride of Christ, would be hurt of the second death and cast into outer darkness. Leaving the church was synonymous with leaving Christ. Authority was vested in leaders who are not accountable to the church, but to one man who was completely unaccountable to anyone, and I would say, or to blended brothers who are completely unaccountable to anyone. Leaders were taught to view themselves as superior and to view members as ignorant, immature children. Members were made dependent on leaders for major and minor life decisions. Leaders exercised a high degree of authoritarian control over many aspects of people's private lives. Legalistic rules covered everything from dating to earrings to which car to buy. The pyramid structure required the sheep to be subject to those above them, to imitate them, and to serve them as service offered to the Lord. Intimidation and coercion ensured compliance. Consequences, loss of privileges, labeling, public character assassination, shunning, threat of eternal loss. As noted, a totalistic lifestyle consumed members' entire lives. An elitist and suspicious stance toward other Christians, except those long dead, resulting in isolation from the wider body of Christ, isolation from relatives and friends who are not in the group, and from society, isolation from outside ideas and information, television, unapproved books, websites, contact with former members. Okay, understanding mind control. I'll pick it up from there after I go to walk with some friends. Okay, so it's gotten late tonight, but I will do my best to just finish this document, Understanding Mind Control. It is nearly impossible for an indoctrinated cult member to feel he can have any security outside the group. When cult leaders tell the public members are free to leave anytime they want, the door is open. They give the impression that members have free will and are simply choosing to stay. Actually, members may not have a real choice because they have been indoctrinated to have a phobia of the outside world. Induced phobias eliminate the psychological possibility of a person choosing to leave the group merely because he is unhappy or wants to do something else. If a person's emotions are successfully brought under the group's control, his thoughts and behavior will follow. So there are other resources. And then just from the book Boundaries by Henry Cloud and John Townsend, I just want to read that bit. And this is one of the most serious problems facing Christians today. Many sincere, dedicated believers struggle with the tremendous confusion about when it is biblically appropriate to set limits. When confronted with their lack of boundaries, they raise good questions. 1. Can I set limits and still be a loving person? 2. What are legitimate boundaries? 3. What if someone is upset or hurt by my boundaries? 4. How do I answer someone who wants my time, love, energy, or money? 5. Why do I feel guilty or afraid when I consider setting boundaries? 6. How do boundaries relate to submission? 7. Aren't boundaries selfish? Misinformation about the Bible's answers to these issues has led to much wrong teaching about boundaries. Not only that, but many clinical psychological symptoms such as depression, anxiety disorders, eating disorders, addictions, impulsive disorders, guilt problems, shame issues, panic disorders, and marital and relational struggles find their root in conflicts with boundaries. This book presents a biblical view of boundaries, what they are, what they protect, how they are developed, how they are injured, how to repair them, and how to use them. This book will answer the above questions and more. Our goal is to help you use biblical boundaries appropriately to achieve the relationships and purposes that God intends for you as His child. Sherry's knowledge of the scriptures seems to support her lack of boundaries. This book aims to help you to see the deeply biblical nature of boundaries as they operate in the character of God, His universe, and His people. This type of boundary problem paralyzes people's no muscles. Whenever they need to protect themselves by saying no, the word catches in their throats. This happens for a number of different reasons. Fear of hurting the other person's feelings, fear of abandonment and separateness, a wish to be totally dependent on another, fear of someone else's anger, fear of punishment, fear of being shamed, fear of being seen as bad or selfish, fear of being unspiritual, fear of one's over-strict critical conscience, This last fear is actually experienced as guilt. People who have an overstrict critical conscience will condemn themselves for things God himself doesn't condemn them for. As Paul says, since their conscience is weak, it is defiled. 1 Corinthians 8:7. Afraid to confront their unbiblical and critical internal parent, they tighten appropriate boundaries. When we give in to guilty feelings, we are complying with a harsh conscience. This fear of disobeying the harsh conscience translates into an inability to confront others, a saying yes to the bad because it would cause more guilt. Biblical compliance needs to be distinguished from this kind of compliance. Matthew 9:13 says that God desires compassion and not sacrifice. In other words, God wants us to be compliant from the inside out, compassionate, not compliant on the outside and resentful on the inside, sacrificial. Compliance take on too many responsibilities and set too few boundaries, not by choice, but because they are afraid. So thank you for sharing this as well, Esther. Thank you all for listening.